Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for another edition of More Games. Coming to you again from my palatial Tokyo estate. Today, got a fun video for you. Gonna take a look at some Neo Geo games. I myself being a fan of the Neo Geo, whether that be the MVS or the AES or the CD for many years now. But today we're going to focus on some games that I think are kind of underappreciated in the Neo Geo library. Usually when we talk about Neo Geo games, we're bringing up stuff like Fatal Fury or King of Fighters or Metal Slug. Those are all amazing games, absolutely. They're well known, they're very popular games for a good reason. But still there are those games in the Neo Geo's long history that for whatever reason kind of flew under the radar for most people. They're not like high profile like series and titles and things. So that's what I wanted to take a look at today. So I picked out 6 Neo Geo games that I think are just totally awesome. But most people maybe aren't aware that they're so awesome. So that's what I'm here for, eh? A little bit of education today. So that's it. Strap in for half a dozen Neo Geo kick-ass games. And we're going to get started with this first game right here. Okay, first up we have Nightmare in the Dark, which is just a straight up awesome game, and I only played it for the first time fairly recently, I think earlier this year, but immediately I really like this game. It's kind of in the same vein as something like Snow Bros, except it has more of like a lighthearted horror motif. Essentially, your little character, he's the caretaker at a cemetery, and then when he notices like the zombies and monsters and spirits all kind of like coalescing and coming out of the ground, it's sort of his responsibility to put things back in order. So each stage has this kind of like different gothic setting, or each series of stages, because you'll play through 4 or 5 stages of just the regular kind of like puzzles. Which they're not necessarily puzzles. The entire premise is that you have to clear all the enemies from the screen, and you do that by hitting them with fireballs that come out of your lantern. And you turn them into a big glowing fireball, and then you kind of like kick them across the screen, and they'll go rolling around and bouncing around. They'll kill all the enemies they come into contact with, and then when they finally explode, they leave behind some kind of point bonus or power-up. The power-ups are things like increasing your movement speed, increasing the range that you can throw your fireballs, and increasing their effectiveness. And then there are just a whole bunch of score bonuses as well. And you'll play through like 4 or 5 stages of that, and then you'll get to a boss, where the boss will have some kind of attacks, but they'll release monsters as well. And you have to turn the monsters into the big fireball to throw them at the boss. You have to do that, I don't know, like 4 or 5 times. You kill the boss, you get a whole bunch of score bonuses, and then you move on to the next series of stages. Not a terribly long game, probably finish it in about, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes. But it is really fun, and the entire like point of it is to get the highest score possible. You get that by chaining together, killing the monsters, and collecting the power-ups and the score bonuses as quickly as you can. So it's a lot of fun. Again, it's a very simple premise. I mean, again, if you played Snow Bros or something similar, then you know how to play this game. Very simple control scheme, very pick-up-and-play type game. It's a lot of fun, and the graphics and sound are really great. I love anything, basically, that has this sort of, like, gothic, but kind of lighthearted horror motif. Kind of in the same vein as, like, a Ghouls and Ghosts or something like that. I like that a lot. You got lots of little creatures, little monsters and ghosts and zombies, and the bosses are pretty cool too. Really big character sprites as well, so that's awesome. Really nice looking game. And the soundtrack is just like excellent. For the most part, it has like a really groovy, quasi like gothic, but sort of like R&B jazz sound to it. However, I don't really know how to describe it. It sounds good. It's a really cool, groovy soundtrack. So all the way around, this game is great. And like I said, I only played it for the first time earlier this year. And it's not a game that I've seen really come up on like very many retro gaming channels. I don't watch a ton, but I do watch some. And usually when I see anything related to the Neo Geo, Nightmare in the Dark is not a game that comes up. Not one of the more popular games, but that's why I say they're underrated. This is a really good game. It's fun. I haven't played multiplayer yet. I'm sure that's very fun. But it's a good game. Pick up and play. A lot of fun. Good graphics. Good sound. Just all the way around, this is a really excellent game. And one that doesn't get nearly enough love, or at least if you ask me. If you haven't played it already, Nightmare in the Dark, it's pretty damn cool. Check it out. Next up, a little bit of beat-em-up action, and that is Robo Army. Which, when it comes to the Neo Geo, there are not like a ton of options for beat-em-ups. There's Burning Fight, which is okay, I guess. I just find it to be like really, really generic. And then there's the Sengoku games as well, which those are the ones I think people mostly know when it comes to the Neo Geo beat-em-ups. And then there's 8-Man as well, which is kind of a beat-em-up. It's not strictly a beat-em-up, but it's kind of. Robo Army, I feel, is like maybe the most overlooked of the Neo Geo beat-em-ups because it's a lot of fun. Again, it's like a very basic game. It's a beat-em-up. It's not rocket science. What you play is cool, like robot cops. You punch the hell out of all kinds of other robots, and like robo dogs and giant robo gorillas and things. You've got a basic punch combo. You can do a back kick to hit enemies coming from behind you. And then you have like a series of super attacks. So when you have a full super attack meter, you do this like really powerful energy wave that can clear the screen of like lesser enemies. Does a lot of damage to bosses. You have a couple of those, and then you can fire off some energy blasts. And then you get more like an energy punch. So it gets weaker. Less effective as you go down, but you can get power-ups to get more super attacks, and you can also pick up little gas cans to refill your health, which is pretty cool. And even the odd weapon to pick up here and there, but probably the coolest power-up, though, is you can turn into, like, a car, and then you just drive around as a car and ram into everything on screen and kill it. So that's cool. There aren't a lot of beat-em-ups out there that let you turn into a car. But yeah, so this game is a lot of fun, pretty standard beat-em-up action, but it's well made, and there's enough cool gimmicks to it. Again, you get the energy attacks, you get to morph into the car thing, all the enemies are really cool. They're not your typical beat-em-up cannon fodder. I like the RoboCop, the literal RoboCop, that has like the little siren alarm lights on his shoulders, and he has his own like robo attack dog. That's pretty cool. But just generally a solid beat-em-up, fun enough, one player. Obviously beat-em-ups are more fun when you're playing co-op, but it's a decent game, and the graphics are pretty damn nice, and so is the soundtrack and sound design in general. It's all really good. So again, there's stuff like Burning Fight and the Sengoku games. Sengoku 3 is especially cool. So that's all well and good. But if you want to play a Neo Geo beat-em-up and you haven't played Robo Army before, maybe you've played those others, definitely don't overlook Robo Army. Like, it's a lot of fun. It's genuinely an excellent game, and I highly recommend it. Again, one of the more underrated earlier Neo Geo games. I think one of the characters in here ended up being adapted into Maxima in the King of Fighters series. I'm not 100% certain on that. But I think so. But this is around that time they were releasing just like these cool games with these like huge character sprites and stuff. Things like this and Baseball Stars and what have you. Really good looking games. And a lot of fun to play. And very, very simple gameplay that pretty much anyone can enjoy. So if you got some time on your hands, you got 45 minutes or so to kill, Definitely try out Robo Army. It's pretty damn cool.
Savage Rain.
Next up, let's get a fighting game in there, because there are a ton of fighting games on the Neo Geo. And usually when you think of Neo Geo fighters, people will immediately go to Fatal Fury, or the King of Fighters, obviously, or maybe even The Art of Fighting. But usually people don't think of Savage Rain, which is kind of too bad, because this game is awesome. And it's actually set in kind of like an alternate future, I think, of the Fatal Fury series. Pretty sure it's set in Southtown. But it has like a more comical tone. The character designs are a little more kind of like wacky and weird. They're on the more unusual side. But it's a solid fighter. It's a lot of fun. The character roster, there's like a lot of variety there. All kinds of different weird characters to pick. Hayate is like your main character, and he has his like own weird style of karate he developed. And he fights with a giant boomerang. Which most of the characters in here, they'll have some kind of like weapon with them that they can use, whether that be like a boomerang or an axe or like a bowling ball, oddly enough. So that's pretty cool, and just like the original Fatal Fury games, you can jump back and forth between the foreground and the background, and then in some of the backgrounds, they're actually items or things that you can launch into the foreground at your opponent, so you can like kick them or punch them, and it'll like launch them at your opponent. You can use them as projectiles, which is pretty cool, and all the characters having a range of super attacks and super combos and things like that, so that's all pretty good. So it's like a well-made, solid playing fighting game with some cool gimmicks and like a comical motif to it. And the graphics are really good. This is an excellent looking game. The soundtrack is really good too. So all the way around, Savage Rain is really great. If you're playing single player, the CPU is like kind of a hard ass. It can be a tough game. It's kind of like I don't know, Super Turbo or something. Just the CPU is cranked way up. But other than that, you know, solid, great fighting game. Again, it's not something people usually mention when they talk about Neo Geo fighters. It's not a King of Fighters game. It's not a Fatal Fury game. It's not Mark of the Wolves or something like that. It's its own weird, quirky little thing. But I like it a lot. So if you've played a lot of Neo Geo fighters, you've enjoyed them, but you've never tried Savage Rain, go for it. It's a unique fighter in the pantheon of all those Neo Geo fighters. This one is pretty unique, and I think underrated. Definitely try it out if you haven't already.
Winner, Hayate.
Next up, a solid shoot 'em up, and that is Blazing Star, which when it comes to shoot 'em ups on the Neo Geo, again, at least in my experience, this isn't the first one that comes to most people's minds. A lot of people have a lot of love for Last Resort, which is a great game for sure, or even like Pulse Star, which has like more of an R-type feel to it. Blazing Star, though, which I think is kind of supposed to be a sequel to Pulse Star. I like this one a lot. This is the game that every time you collect a score bonus, a woman yells bonus, which you think would get annoying after a while, but it's kind of funny, so I didn't really get too annoyed by it. I like this game, though, for the simplicity, and I think as far as like shoot-em-ups go, especially like the Neo Geo shooters, this one I think is a little more on the easy side. Essentially, you only really have one fire button to worry about, but you can do charge-up attacks as well, and those deal like a ton of damage. So you don't got like super bombs and all kinds of stuff like that. No weird gimmicks. It's just like a straightforward, solid, well-made shoot 'em up. That's fairly challenging. I'd say the first 2, maybe 3 stages are pretty reasonable as far as the difficulty goes, and then it gradually gets more difficult. But it never gets like insane. Like, it never feels unfair. It doesn't throw like a ton of stuff at you like, oh, okay, well, there was no way I was ever going to dodge that. It's not like an old school like R-Type or something like that. So the challenge is reasonable, and the controls are like about as simple as it gets. You got a lot of power-ups, obviously. You can pick up power-ups for your main shots, as well as missiles and things like that. And the more power-ups you pick up, the bigger your charge meter gets. So the more powerful you are, the more powerful of a supercharge attack you can unleash. So that's really cool. That's kind of like your lifesaver when it comes to boss battles. And all the way around, it's just a solid, fun shooter. And again, this is a game that looks really good. It has like a quasi, kind of like pre-rendered look to it, which doesn't always work very well for games, but it works well here because the backgrounds are pretty dense. Looks really nice. You got a variety of enemies, big bosses, all kinds of stuff like that. Everything you want from a good shoot 'em up, you got it here. And then the soundtrack is really good too. Just lots of like fun, like high energy music that you really want for a shoot 'em up like this. So it's a solid game in all areas, and it's a lot of fun. If you've played like a bunch of other Neo Geo shooters and you've enjoyed them, again, stuff like Last Resort, Pulse Star, maybe even Andro Dunos. If you played all this stuff, if you've never played Blazing Star before, which I think I had this on the Neo Geo CD like years ago. But again, it's not one that I typically hear a lot of people sing the high praises of. But it's really good. You can even say it's underrated, because that's the purpose of this video, isn't it? Maybe to suggest to you some Neo Geo games that you hadn't tried yet. This would fall into that category. Blazing Star, kind of a later Neo Geo release, but a really good one, and one I'd recommend for shoot 'em up fans because it's really, really good. Again, Blazing Star, check it out if you haven't already. Next up, Battle of Flipshot, which I think this game is getting kind of like a little bit more recognition now. I think it was released digitally or something, and some people were discovering what a cool game it is. It most reminds me of maybe something like Flying Power Disc, aka Windjammers, where it's a very simple kind of like Pong style game, except you've got a bunch of different characters to choose from, and they've all got their own like special shots and things. But where Windjammers, you're just trying to get the frisbee thing into the goal behind your opponent. Here you have all these targets behind you, and you have to break all of them before you can win the round. So it's very much like a game of Pong, except you have these special shots. So you can either have the ball like morph into something and like go faster. If it hits your opponent can spin out or something like that. The only thing is that when you're breaking the targets, eventually when you get down to where your opponent has like one target left, it can be a little bit of a pain in the ass to get that final target. So some of these matches can go on for a really long time. Basically, one opponent's like down to like one target, the other one has like a full thing behind them. So a lot of those targets will get smashed before you hit that final one, unless you're like a really accurate shot, which I unfortunately am not. Also, this is a game where the CPU can be pretty tough. So if you notice, I'm playing the same handful of characters over and over again. That's why. The CPU here can be brutal, but this is, again, like a game that would be probably better be played with multiplayer, because who wants to play like one-player Pong? But even if you are playing single player, you're getting your ass kicked by the CPU. It is like good and like fun enough that you want to like keep trying. Luckily, I'm playing a ROM. I don't have to like keep pumping change into it or something. But it's really fun. Again, it's like as simple as gameplay can possibly get, which is great for an arcade game like this. So that's nice, a lot of fun, pick up and play, good for multiplayer, exactly what you want from a little competitive Pong style game. Graphics are pretty nice, got some wacky characters in there, some cool little effects, it's very colorful, so that's all well and good, and the soundtrack is pretty damn good too. So all the way around, it's just a really fun game. I don't like it more than Windjammers. Like, Windjammers is like just one of my all-time like favorites Neo Geo games, period. But it's in that wheelhouse. I think there's another one exactly like this that Visco developed either before or after this one. I still haven't played that one yet. Gotta give it a try. But for right now, just say Battle Flipshot. If you've never played it before, maybe get a friend to play with and give this one a shot, because it's a lot of fun, and I imagine the competitive matches could get very heated very quickly. But again, underrated Neo Geo game. I rarely hear Battle Flipshot ever come up when people are discussing like really fun, easy pick up and play Neo Geo arcade games. This is one of them. Give it a try if you haven't already. It's really, really fun. And last, but definitely not least, I have Ghostlop, which, talk about underrated. I hadn't really ever even heard of this game before until I got just a whole ton of Neo Geo ROMs and found it there, and I was like, oh, this looks like a kind of a quirky little puzzle game, let me give that a shot. And was just immediately like, wow, this game is awesome. So the premise is it's a puzzle game of sorts. It's kind of like a puzzle game mixed with more like a breakout style game. I don't know, it's like a melding of a few different gameplay styles. But essentially, your character's at the bottom of the screen, and descending are red and blue like ghost spheres. And so you throw the blue ball with one button and you knock out the blue ghosts, and you throw the red ball with a different button and knock out the red ghosts, but if it makes contact with the opposite color, it'll just bounce around. But after you've thrown the ball, you can actually hit the buttons to change its color after you've thrown it. So you can get these, huge combos where you break through a bunch of blue ghosts, switch over to red, break through a bunch of reds. And the more you can break in like these single combos, it's kind of like Puyo Puyo, where you'll send a bunch more, I guess junk ghosts and stuff over to your opponent. But you have to make sure you're always catching your ball, because every time you miss it, if it hits the floor, another row of ghosts is just gonna come down. So you really have to be mindful of that. So you're throwing the ball, you're changing the color, your opponent is going as fast as they can. I really like games like this, like these competitive style puzzle games. I mean, again, things like Puyo Puyo, maybe Tetris Battle Gaiden, or even something like Twinkle Star Sprites. I guess this kind of reminds me of that, because it's much more fast-paced, and it's strictly a competitive game. And you're playing against all these different characters, and it has kind of it's supposed to have, I think, a Ghostbusters kind of motif to it. So you've got these two playable characters. They have a ghost-busting service, and then a lot of the characters you'll play against, if you're playing single player, they're all different kinds of ghosts and monsters and things. I have not had the chance to play this game competitively yet. I imagine it would be really, really fun. So that's something I'm looking forward to trying maybe in the future. But even as a single player game, it's great. It's a lot of fun. The CPU can be pretty tough, but it's not unmanageable. And I just like it a lot. I like a good puzzle game that is competitive, and this is exactly that. It's exactly what you want from a game like this, because the action is fast-paced, and you're constantly on your toes, trying to react to things, throw the ball, change the color, catch the ball, deal with what your opponent is doing. So that's all really fun. And again, visuals, nothing outstanding, but a good-looking game. At the very least, you've got some really quirky characters, some funny ghost characters and things like that. That's really cool. And again, the soundtrack, sound design, it's all very good too. Just fun music to play to. But the gameplay itself is what really sells this one. It's fun, it's addictive, it's easy to understand how to play it, but once you start playing and the ghosts start falling down faster and faster, it gets hectic. It definitely has you engaged from start to finish. Just as odd as it is to say, an action-packed puzzle game. Usually action games and puzzle games are kept quite separate. But no, this one there's always action. There's never any lulls. So I like that. So yeah, Ghostlop. A game, again, I only picked it up and played it recently. Immediately thought it was like really cool. And was wondering like why hadn't I never heard of this game before. Any channel I've ever watched where they talk about Neo Geo games. Again, I haven't watched like every retro gaming channel out there, and there are some that focus strictly on SNK and Neo Geo games. So I'm sure Ghostlop is a game that's come up like countless times, but just in my experience, I haven't seen it come up. Usually, if someone's talking about a Neo Geo puzzle game, it's usually like Magical Drop or something like that, or even that was it Idle Money Exchanger. That, you know, I've heard of that. I watched my friends playing that. I think they were playing it on like PSN or something. That one's really cool too. But Ghostlop, just to me, a game that hasn't gotten nearly enough love from the retro gaming community. I don't know what it goes. It's like if you're gonna pick it up on AES or whatever. I feel like this has to be a fairly elusive game. Again, I'd never heard of it before, and I've played like quite a lot of Neo Geo games in my life. But yeah, so I would say this is an underrated Neo Geo game. It's a lot of fun. If you like competitive puzzle games like Puyo Puyo, like Magical Drop, Tetris Battle Gaiden, all that kind of stuff, you're really, really gonna like Ghostlop. It's a lot of fun. I can't sing its praises highly enough. Check it out. So there you go, everybody. Those are 6 Neo Geo games that I personally think are underrated. They're really cool, fun, awesome games that most people don't really think of when they think Neo Geo. But let me know down in the comments, what do you think are some underrated Neo Geo games? Maybe if I do another one of these videos, there'll be some good stuff for me to play. Because games like Battle Flipshot and Ghostlop, like puzzle games and stuff, that showed up on the Neo Geo, I find that those are usually the ones that people overlook in favor of the fighting games and the run and gun, stuff like that, that was much more popular on the Neo Geo platforms. And then some of this stuff is just like wildly expensive, regardless if it's AES, MVS. Some of them are even pretty expensive on the Neo Geo CD, which was like initially like the more affordable option if you want to play some Neo Geo games. So no one would blame you for either, you know, emulating or even go find some of this stuff on like the eShop or the PlayStation Network or Steam. Those are all great ways to play some of these really epic old 90s Neo Geo games. Anyway, I'm rambling. Again, let me know down in the comments what you thought of any of these games. Always love to hear from you. And with that being said, thanks for watching more games, everybody. I hope to see you back in the next video. And until then, take care. Goodbye.